All right. Hello, everybody. Things have not gone as planned this week. I was expecting to be home this afternoon, and I'm not. I went to La Vida. I was expecting to be in La Vida Monday and Tuesday, and then Tuesday evening drive home. But I had to stay for an appointment this morning, and then the person who was arriving was an hour late. So when I left there, I live an hour and a half from La Vida. When I left there, it was already too late to drive all the way home. So I drove to my mom's house, which is only an hour away, in order to make this teaching. But since I'm not home, I don't have my 7 steps with me. I happen to have Out of the Stillness with me, but I had planned to be home, last night, and I left 7 steps there. So what I need is a partner today. I need someone who has the 7 steps to awakening. Sina's got her hand up, that's willing to read the quote from that. Thank you, Sina. That's perfect. And that way we can just move on without any interruption at all. So Sina, I actually looked at this a little bit last week, but I did it quickly. So we're going to start with it and see if there's anything else to say before we move on. Sina, we're going to start with quote number 90. So if you could read 90 for us, then I'll read from Out of the Stillness. Thank you.
Okay, again, this is quote 90. Whatever is conceived by the mind must be false, for it is bound to be relative and limited.
Thank you. And so now I will read from Out of the Stillness. Mind imagines. It does not know. Therefore, when mind imagines what enlightenment or self-realization is like, it creates a false concept of realization. If that imagined state is believed to be constant truth, a temporary state is grasped at as eternal truth, and constant present truth is missed in the imagining of a temporary state as achievement. Be aware of imagined concept states that are valued as achievement of enlightenment. Inquire about the truth of these ideas. Can anything temporary or wavering be constant present truth? Can constant present truth be grasped for or held? What is always here now, even as states seem to waver and change? And that is the end of that. So the first thing that comes to mind is I remember a person a long time ago who made a statement: if you can't heal the sick or raise the dead, you aren't enlightened. And that's wrong, right? That's wrong. I also remember a statement Eckhart Tolle made once about, and I don't remember his exact words, but the idea was that at first there was this bliss, and then it just becomes, natural, right? So even the ecstatic experience of awakening, compared to what he experienced before, and then the shift to awakening, there was just this dramatic bliss in the beginning, but then the new state became normal, right? Became normal. Another thing that came to my mind as I read this was there's some place in NTI, I believe it's in NTI Luke, where the Holy Spirit said to me as the scribe, but of course to everyone who reads it as well, the Holy Spirit said something like, where do you imagine I'm leading you? And then said, let that go. Whatever you're imagining, let that go. And I do remember that I had great trouble with that, because I had my idea of what enlightenment was. And not only did I have an idea of what enlightenment was, I wanted enlightenment to be that. That's the truth of it. I wanted enlightenment to be what I imagined it to be. And so, when I'm writing in TI and I'm told to look at what I think it is, while I'm writing, while I'm scribing, when Holy Spirit was saying, where do you think I am leading you? Very quickly, I imagined, what it was going to be like to be enlightened. And then the next thing I'm told is to let that go, that was an obstacle in whatever way I was told, to let those ideas go, that was an obstacle. I felt great resistance to that. Great resistance. It was almost like, if enlightenment isn't what I imagine it to be, then, I don't want it, because I want this, what I'm imagining, right? That's what I want. But at some point, I don't have a dramatic story about how that fell away. At some point, wanting enlightenment to be what I imagined it was, did fall away. And I think that was very important, because I think that what I imagined it was an obstacle, because I would keep looking for what I imagined, and therefore I wouldn't notice what was here. Right? Keep looking for what I imagined, and therefore not notice what was here. And the truth is, enlightenment is here. That's true for all of us. It's already here. Jesus says something in A Course in Miracles early in the course, and again, not an exact quote, but the idea is right. He says something like, we are the same as him. The only difference is he's nothing but love, right? In other words, we're the same love that he is. It's just we've got other stuff added on. And so, but the love is already perfect. It's already here. It's already what we are. The enlightenment is already perfect. It's already here. It's already what we are. Our only job is we don't have to recognize what enlightenment is. Our job is to recognize what isn't enlightenment and let that go. It's more of an undressing, right? It's an undressing. One other friend, I won't mention her name, but one other friend who, woke up a few years ago, seems to me like about 5 years ago. I remember when I had her tell the story about when she woke up, and there was another teacher helping her to look right at the enlightenment that is already here. Okay, because that's all the teacher has to do, is help us to look at the enlightenment that's already here, helping her to look at it. And the teacher was able to get her to really see it and to recognize it for what it was. And I think the friend's feeling was something like, that's it, like, that's it. Right? That's it. And the answer is yes, that's it. So it is our simple natural state. And what's nice about it is it's peacefully content, happy, able to be with what is, able to even trust the unknown. Even those words are not strong enough. It's not really trust the unknown. It's more of this knowing that all is well, right? Knowing that all is well, and therefore not needing to know how things are going to go, not needing to know how things are going to work out. My experience now, and I don't know what you want to call my experience. I don't care if we put the word enlightenment on it. I don't care if we don't, to be honest, because it's completely meaningless to me. But my experience now is very different than it's ever been before. And it's nothing that I would have imagined. For example, my experience now is that I am fully aware that I don't know anything. I'm fully aware that, although I can have a plan, for example, to be home Tuesday night, that I have no idea what's going to unfold. I have no idea how things are going to go. I have no idea what my part is going to be in it. And what's really going to happen is just going to be this flow of experience. And there's just going to be this going with that flow, and that everything's perfect and it couldn't be different if you wanted it to be. In fact, it reminds me of when Ramana Maharshi's mother came to him. He was very young, remember, he ran away like age 17. So he was, I don't know how young he was when she found him, but he was very young. And, she goes to him and pleads with him to come back home. And he writes her, he's in silence, he's not speaking to anyone, but he takes the trouble to write his mother a note, which is really sweet. He didn't just ignore her, he wrote his mother a note. And I don't remember the exact words of that either, but the gist of it was, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And whatever isn't going to happen, isn't going to happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's my experience. And that's amazing to me, because I remember the first time I read that, when I was reading that story about Ramana Maharshi and his mother, and I read that note, it wasn't my experience. I had great resistance to it. And I also thought, I just plain thought that's not true. I really thought, if Ramana Maharshi wanted to get up and go home with his mom, he could. What's this bullshit about whatever's going to happen is going to happen? Whatever's not going to happen is not going to happen. That's honestly how I felt the first time I read that. But that's not my experience now. My experience is now what he wrote in that note. That is my experience. So it's interesting. Because I'm just going to tell you guys the truth, because I don't know what else to tell you. Although the reason it's not that I've attempted to lie. It's just that I don't think the truth makes much sense to the mind. So that's where I want to hesitate, right? I kind of want to hesitate, because just like I had a reaction to what Ramana Maharshi wrote to his mother, who knows how you're going to feel about what I'm going to say. So part of me is like, they might not want to hear this. Something is very different. And I can't tell you how this change came about. But once upon a time, there was not only the belief, but what appeared to be the experience of being able to control myself and events. That's what it felt like. I'm sure you guys know that experience, because you probably are having it now. I don't know if that was just imagination and denial, but now I don't have the slightest chance of being able to do that. That's the difference. I make plans all the time, just like everybody else. Like I was planning to be home last night. I told Jacqueline when I saw her in July, I said, I have never been more wrong in my life than I am now, because it seems like every single thing I plan does not happen that way. Right? I mean, it's just like, I'm wrong all the time. I mean, I still don't know how to function without saying, okay, I'll see you Tuesday night, Ron, I'll be back Tuesday night, but then it doesn't happen. And there's nothing I could have done about it. And that's been my experience over and over and over and over. I can't tell you how much that has been my experience. It's like, if I say it, it's not going to happen that way. That's kind of how it feels now. If I say this is what's going to happen, it won't. It won't. And so even when I say something's going to happen, I'm not bought into it. I just, like I said, I don't know how to live without, when Ron says, what time, when are you going to be home? Answering, I don't know how to live without answering, without answering what I think. But nothing ever goes that way. And I am okay with that. So the real feeling, you'll hear people say things like, the person is gone. If I had never heard anybody else's words and I was just describing this experience with my own words, and that's what I'm going to do, I probably wouldn't use those words, the person is gone. I would use the words that the person is an illusion, not gone, an illusion. Like it's still the person that answers that says, I'll be home Tuesday night. Right. I don't, I mean, it's even, those words are too hard. Maybe it's true. It's more like the person is more of an apparition. The person is more of a thought. The person is a temporary appearance, but it's not a consistent temporary appearance. That's what I used to believe. I used to believe that I was that same person who was 5 years old and had this experience, as now being the 62-year-old person who's having this experience, and all of the experiences in between. That's who I am. That's what I used to believe. Now I see this appearance that's happening over, like every minute an appearance is happening, and that appearance I can still point at and say, there's the person, but the person isn't anything real. It isn't anything substantial. It doesn't have any lastingness to it. It's like the moment now showing up as this, right? So it's an apparition. Does that make sense? But I am this constant background that's here, right? So it's not like the person is gone. Not the way some people word it. There is no person. At least that's not my experience right now. Maybe 2 years from now, I'll come back and say something different. I don't know. But that's not my experience now. It's more like the person is nothing but a temporary appearance. And it has no weight to it. It's very, very thin. Like A Course in Miracles talking about the world says that the world is a thin veil. That's what the person is like, this thin veil. But it keeps appearing. It hasn't stopped appearing, right? I think Michael Langford tried to explain this to me once. Let me see if I can remember what he said. If I'd known I was going to say this, I would have looked it up, because I'm sure I still have it on my computer somewhere. He said something about like the person is kind of like the water in the stream in front of you. And when you're standing there watching a stream in front of you, you imagine that the stream is constant, right? There's a stream that's always, always here. But if you get very specific and honest about it, that water right there, that water right there, that water right there is constantly moving. There's nothing constant about it, right? Like by the time you say that water right there, that water right there has already moved on. And he said, that's what the person is like. That's my experience now. See, when I read that, when he sent that to me a number of years ago, I didn't even understand that. But that's my experience. So it's not like the person is gone. It's just this appearance, and it's not tied together as if it's had constancy. It's seen as separate appearances, appearing. Oh, good. Melissa said, oh my gosh, I get that. How cool is that? I certainly didn't get it the first time I heard it. But yeah, mind being blown with lots of resistance at the same time, Marisol says. You know what I imagined enlightenment to be? I imagined enlightenment to be a person full of love, full of happiness. I imagined it as a person, though, you see? And you know what, again, what NTI was telling me was what I imagined it to be was the obstacle. Can you see? The idea of a good person, a happy person, a loving person, a holy person, a person that raises the dead and heals the sick. Notice how the word person just keeps being in all these imaginings. And it's not that. You see, it's not that. So again, this says mind imagines, it does not know. Therefore, when mind imagines what enlightenment or self-realization is like, it creates a false concept of realization. If that imagined state is to believe constant, is to be, sorry, let me say that again. If that imagined state is believed to be constant truth, a temporary state is grasped at as eternal truth, and constant present truth is missed in the imagining of a temporary state as achievement. So if I imagine that the stream is constant, right, I don't notice that it's different water going by all the time, right? There's nothing constant in a stream. And it's the same with the person. Nisargadatta said something when he was kind of talking about this. He said something like, again, not an exact quote, but something like, the person is nothing but a bundle of memories. You know, the first time I read that, I go, well, yeah. You know, like I thought, yes, it is. So what are you trying to tell me? It's a bundle of, you know, I remember being 4, I remember being 10, I remember being, you know, but what he was saying is, it's not constant. You're the one that's putting these appearances together and saying it's constant. And that's why now, well, now that we're on this spiritual path, that's why we're taught to look for what is constant. Because there is something here that's constant. And what we're doing is we're projecting its constancy with our imaginations. We're projecting its constancy on all of these appearances, and we're saying they're constant, but they're not. They're not. If these appearances were constant, Doreen would still be teaching. See, that water has already gone by. There's not a single appearance that's constant. Right? Praise the Lord. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want the appearances to be constant. Talk about a boring movie. That's called a photograph, not a movie. But yet there is something here that's constant. And that's what we're taught to look at now. That's what we're taught to tune into now. And that's what my friend saw and woke up to, but her first reaction was something kind of like, that's it? Right? That's it? It's just this that's always here? Mm-hmm. And seeing that you're that, right? That's what you are. You know, Ramana Maharshi also said something like, anything that has to be gained is not worth having. See, you don't have to gain enlightenment. It's already here. It's already here. It's what you are. And so our imagination of what enlightenment is in the way. Because our imagination of what enlightenment is a constant person with specific characteristics. And there is no such thing as a constant person. Be aware of imagined concept states that are valued as achievement of enlightenment, like a loving person. Inquire about the truth of these ideas. Can anything temporary or wavering be constant, present truth? Can constant, present truth be grasped for or held? What is always here, now, even as states, seem to waver and change. Sina, can you read number 90 again from 7 Steps?
Quote 90. Whatever is conceived by the mind must be false, for it is bound to be relative and limited.
Thank you. So before we go on to whatever is next, is there anything anybody wants to say? All right, Lena.
Hello, Regina. Thank you. It was fantastic. I have actually confusion which came into my head in a couple of days ago, and I'm contemplating on it. While you said concentrate on constant, it's wonderful. I understand that, and I'm trying. Also, I remember my question would be how we need to react to temporary. And I know that we need to do the best choice. You taught us, I remember that. But so far you are saying that whatever you are making, it doesn't work. This confused me. Also about surrender confused me. For example, an example will be very easy. I was introduced to a woman with whom I should make some business, and she behaved very recklessly. So she didn't respond me, she disappeared, and I think, why should I deal with her? I went and I found another woman, and she's just wonderful. And then I'm thinking, if God gave her to me, maybe I should continue to work with her. How you said an example, you were living with a drug addict. Then right now you're saying Maharshi was choosing. He didn't return to his mom.
No, I did not say he didn't choose. I said my thought at the time was, sure, he can choose. He was saying he couldn't, and I didn't understand that. So I just want to be clear on that. Yeah.
Thank you. So my question then, what my contemplation, should I continue with that woman who was not responsible because God gave it to her, or was it correct that I went and found a responsible and a good woman?
Yeah, I can't answer that question.
How's about, this is about surrender. This is about, should we accept everything what's happened in our life? Should we choose, or should we go with whatever?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I can also say is that my experience before and my experience now are different. Like when there was the appearance of a person, there were practices that I was taught from within to practice. And, although there's no direct evidence, I cannot directly say those practices brought me to this experience because there's no direct connection. I don't know how else to say this. I used to hear people say that too, and that used to piss me off. So if you're pissed off, go ahead, be pissed off. I understand. But there's no direct connection that can be identified between a practice in the past and this experience now. Just like the person is an appearance. It's the same thing, right? So there's no direct connection where I can say, because I surrendered, because I followed intuition, because I practiced inquiry, because I did that, I have this experience. I cannot say that. What I can say, however, okay, you ready for this? What I can say is prior to my experience being this, when I had the experience of being a person, all of those things kept me in harmony with my heart, which made my experience of being a person better, easier, more aligned. So, therefore, I would still highly recommend the practice of surrender. But when we start getting worried about, did I surrender correctly? Or should I have done this instead? We're actually leaving that state of harmony, right? Just through the asking of it, just through the thinking about it. So the trick is, as long as there appears to be a person, as long as that's the experience, there's no sense in lying about it, right? As long as that's the experience, you want to be in harmony with your inner self.
Okay.
That's all it's going to do is make your life a whole lot easier.
Love it.
And so the question is, what do you feel in harmony with? Do you feel in harmony with staying with this lady? Do you feel in harmony about, going back to the other lady? That's all you got to check for. Where's the harmony and where's the disharmony? And stay with the harmony. Follow the harmony. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Much simpler than we make it. The mind is the problem. The thinking is the problem. The analyzing is the problem. The questioning is the problem. The doubting is the problem. So just let go of all that and be. That's what we're talking about.
Mhm. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we have a question. Can
Oh,
you repeat a quote you mentioned about that which we reach to obtain is not worth obtaining?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how the mind interprets that, because I think the way the quote was heard is different than it was intended, maybe based on the question. So let's find out. It was Ramana Maharshi, and of course, as I mentioned, it's probably not an exact quote, although it's very close. But if somebody wants to look it up, they can. But the quote is something like, anything that can be gained is not worth having. Anything that can be gained is not worth having, something like that. And if somebody wants to do a search, a Google, you might be able to find it with Ramana Maharshi and quote and the word gain. I don't know if you can find it or not, but you might give it a try. Anything that can be gained is not worth having. And what he meant by that is, you already are the enlightenment, and that's where your attention should go. If you want to realize that. He's not telling you what to do. Ramana Maharshi never told anybody what to do. You can do whatever you want. But the people who came to him and were questioning him at least thought they wanted self-realization, right? And so all of his answers were applying to that. And so when he says anything that can be gained is not worth having, he's directing us to look at what's constant. He's directing us to look at what's already here. It doesn't have to be gained, it's here, right? And it's the most valuable thing there is, So that's really what that particular quote meant. And Melissa.
Hey there, everybody. How are you? Thank you. And yeah, I just thank you for your clarification. I asked about the quote, and we climbed, my husband and son and I climbed Mount Baker this weekend, and all I can say is I've missed some days of lessons, and I feel totally lost about where I am right now, and so I'm really glad to be tuned in here with you. I don't feel uncomfortable though about getting confused as much as I used to. And you helped me a couple weeks ago with that. And thank you. Also on the way down, there was a lot of pain. I have some arthritis in my feet. So lots of pain going on. And I think the whole way down, we were on the glacier for it was 11 and a half miles on the glacier. So about 8 hours. And I contemplated empty shell, and I just, you all with me. And I appreciate that. And I guess what I wanted to say is I also know that if I'm confused, it's okay too. And I don't take anything that's said by anyone as something that I need to live by, as much as I hope that what's within me, I'm willing to take what's going to be best for me. And so if that all makes sense, I give my grace, appreciation to all of you for helping me to get there. So thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Shall we go to whatever I have circled next in the book? Let me see what it is. It looks like sign it. It's number 93. So if you would read 93 twice for us, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Stay beyond all thoughts in silent being awareness. Stay beyond all thoughts in silent being awareness.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so let me read what I wrote. It's a little longer. So number 93. Thoughts interpret what is seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and felt, and therefore make a story about it. Stories are for characters. Specific characters may like or dislike based on interpretation, react one way or another based on interpretation. A character is a false self. Thoughts or interpretation is the character's script. All of this covers pure beingness, which is true self. Learn that all thoughts are meaningless because they are for the character, and the character isn't real. Disregard the thoughts, the character interpretation. Experience seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling from pure being. Notice the same pureness in each experience, the same pureness as is in the beingness that I am. If interpretation appears, notice it from being. If interpretation is temporarily believed, notice believing from being. You know, I posted an awakening game a few weeks ago. The name of that awakening game was Drop the Labels. And so if you didn't see that game and you want to go find it, you can. And the idea in that game was to kind of move us in the direction of what this quote is talking about. The idea in that game is to experience without thought. So, for example, you know, if you have hair right now, just touch your hair. If you're bald, then just touch your baldness. But without thinking about it, without any thoughts at all, notice the experience. Now, you might find that's hard. You might find while you're trying to notice the experience, you might find that the mind is saying coarse or soft or thin or whatever the heck it's saying. And that's the interpretation of the experience. That is not the experience itself, right? And this is what we want to learn the difference between. Because what happens is we have become so accustomed to the interpretation as if it is the experience that we don't even know the actual experience directly. And so what Drop the Labels was about was, you know, experience something, attempt to just experience it without the interpretation. You know, like, I'm going to take a drink of this. I'm going to experience it without the interpretation. There was so much there, you guys can't even begin to imagine. So what this particular journal entry is saying, and remember, this whole thing, by the way, was me writing for me. I wasn't really writing for you. I'm happy to share it with you. But this was me writing for me, right? Me teaching me. So what this is saying is that when I'm interpreting, you know, like if I'm interpreting, I don't want to do this, you know, I don't want to do laundry today, right? That's the character's script. That's the character script to experience doing laundry as a burden. And as long as I continue to listen to these interpretations and believe these interpretations, I am also necessarily going to see myself as that character. I can't see laundry as a burden without seeing myself as the person who doesn't want to do laundry today. You see how that works? They're tied together. So what this is recommending then is, and again, just now when you were feeling your hair, those labels may have been happening anyway, right? But what this is recommending as the first step is to see the labels from beingness and to notice them as labels. That's the same as seeing thoughts from beingness and noticing them as thoughts. So, for example, if the thought comes up, I don't want to do laundry today, that's a thought. Just saying that's a thought is way different than believing I don't want to do laundry today. They're not the same. That's not the same thing. So as you start to see these interpretations from beingness, and you start to see it as mind stuff that's kind of going by on the screen, you start to disidentify from being the person. I repeat, I really hope, as Jesus used to say, for those who have ears to hear, right? I repeat, you cannot believe the interpretations and not also see yourself as a person. Yes, Melissa.
So is that kind of what I was trying to say, which you might not have an answer to? So like going down instead of going, my foot hurts, my toes kill. Oh my God. It's just, is that what I was trying to do? Like, instead of identify with that as a person, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Some things are so hard to put into words. I used to have something they called plantar fasciitis. It did go away. Maybe it went away miraculously, and I'll tell that story in a second. But when I had plantar fasciitis, it hurt bad just to walk across the room, right? Just to get up and walk across the room. And so what I decided to do was see that as an experience, which somehow, believe it or not, choosing to see it as an experience, I'm already stepping back from it a little. In other words, this isn't me and my feet hurting, right? This is an experience, this pain, because I'm not going to deny the pain, but this is an experience. And then I decided to see it as a temporary experience. And then the third thing I did is, my mom always says, why'd you do? I'll tell you my mom's interpretation of this in a moment. But I was going to Israel, and I was going to walk what's called the Jesus Trail, which is a 4-day walk from Nazareth to Capernaum. And I told my feet, I said, you can hurt all you want on the Jesus Trail, but when this trip is done, you're done. And I hobbled across Israel, and literally people stopped and offered me, you could see me hobbling. So people were offering me rides and stuff because I looked like I could barely walk. I hobbled across Israel, and the plantar fasciitis disappeared after that. Now, here's what my mom says. She says, why didn't you tell your feet to quit hurting before the Jesus Trail? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even have an answer for that. It didn't occur to me. I think, maybe my best answer is I was giving the experience the opportunity to flourish rather than trying to cut it, right? Like, go ahead, hurt as much as you want, but, then we're done. And that's what happened, right? That's what happened. That's my experience of that. So, but again, I think what I said in the beginning was probably what was most important. The rest of it is a fun story, and it did actually happen, but it's, story. What was most important were those first two decisions. A, this is an experience. It's not me, right? This is an experience. B, it's a temporary experience, right? So I think that's an important way to see something. And it's true. It's true of everything. All experiences are temporary. And sometimes people may come up with stuff. Well, what if you have cancer and it kills you? To be honest, that was still a temporary experience. And to be honest, throughout that, there were many, many, many temporary experiences that we tied together and gave one name called cancer. Byron Katie once said something like, and again, not an exact quote, but something like, cancer doesn't exist if you aren't thinking about it. At that time, she had what we call cancer. What she meant was, if my attention's not on the cancer, it's not in my experience, right? But if I'm thinking about it all the time and tying those moments together, it feels like a constant experience, see? So it's really helpful to separate what I am, which is beyond experience, from experience. This is an experience, okay? This is an experience. And then this is a temporary experience. That's just calling out the truth. Marisol says, is that the same as wanting something to be different? Like when you told that pain that it would be done after your trip? That's a good question, Marisol. I'm going to say I don't think so, but it's very subtle, very, very subtle, but I'll tell you why. I think wanting it to be different is probably what my mom is thinking of when she says, why didn't you tell it to go away before the trip? I think what I wanted it to do is I wanted it to live its life fully. And I thought this was a great opportunity for it to live its plantar fasciitis life while I'm walking across Israel. But, it's very subtle. So I don't know how to answer that exactly, but I wanted to, I guess what was different in me, the intent that maybe was a little different, was I wanted to give it its life. I wanted it to experience itself fully. But it's a slightly, I can see what you mean, though. I see your point, too. So like I said, all it is a story.
Can I say something real quick to that?
Yeah.
I just like Marisol, and if this makes sense, I didn't wish for the pain to be different than it was.
Yeah.
I tried to put my attention other places and say, this is a thought. This is a thought. So I feel like, I'm starting to go in that direction. And I guess my question was, God, I want to know if I'm understanding what the I am is, and I don't, and that's okay. I'm not there yet. So that's okay. But that, I feel like Marisol, I feel like that's the thing. I wasn't wishing for it to not be there or to go away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose it's also just that already seeing it as temporary. Like I know it's temporary, so, but no, I wanted, as crazy as this sounds, I wanted it to live its life, that pain. And that's why I suppose I gave it the opportunity to live its life as I walked across Israel. So there was a slightly different motive behind it. It's just like when my dog died, I never tried to deny, the sadness came in waves. Anybody who's had unless you get way into the desperation of the thoughts, if you're with it in a beingness kind of way, the sadness still comes in waves, especially the first 3 days, right? Whenever the wave would come, I wanted to live it. I wanted to look at pictures of the dog and I wanted to cry. I wanted the sadness to live, but I didn't expect it to be forever. Right? It lasted about 3 days. That was its life. But while it was here, I wasn't avoiding it. I wasn't, trying to pretend like it wasn't there. I'm looking at pictures of the dog with my family. I'm crying and it felt sweet. That's a funny thing. It felt sweet. It didn't feel painful. It felt sweet to live that sadness. So maybe that's similar. But again, not expecting it to be forever. And the key is not resisting. Yeah, the key is going all the way into it and letting it live. Respecting it as something that has its own temporary life. Even pain, even sadness, and in effect, that's what you're doing with rest, accept, and trust. With rest, accept, and trust, when you're resting the mind, what you're doing is you're not believing the story anymore. You're resting your mind away from the story, but you're accepting the feeling deeply and you're allowing it to live its life. That's the whole trick with rest, accept, and trust. And this is where people mess up with rest, accept, and trust. They try to use rest, accept, and trust to make the feeling quit, like this, right? The purpose of rest, accept, and trust is to stay out of the way while it lives its life. But to understand that it's a temporary experience. And when it fully lives its life, it will end on its own. Right? That's the trick behind rest, accept, and trust. So you let the guilt live its life. You let the fear live its life. You let the anger live its life. You respect it, let it flourish, let it live its life. And then its life ends because it was never anything but a temporary experience in the first place. Right? That's all it was ever meant to be. Now, I will say, for me, there's a huge difference between letting it live its life and outwardly expressing it. So, for example, if I'm feeling anger towards someone, to yell at that person, cuss them out, say, I never want to be around you again, whatever, that's not letting it live its life. That's believing the story. And to me, letting it live its life and believing the story are not the same thing. In order to let it live its life, listen to those words. In order to let it live its life, I have to get out of the way. I'm not living its life for it. I'm getting out of the way and letting it live its life. You see, I'm not in there. So what I do is I back off, I go to my bedroom and close the door or whatever I got to do. I walk away from the temptation to yell at someone, to cuss them out, to tell them I never want to see you again. I walk away from the temptation to put myself in that. I go away, but then I don't try to repress it. I don't try to change it. I sit back, in my chair in the privacy of my bedroom, out of the way, not interfering, letting it live its life by itself without me. You see the difference? Yeah. So we only have 4 minutes left. Let me go ahead and Sina, why don't you read number 93 for us one more time, then I'll read my 93. Yours was very short. Listen to what Sina has to say after the discussion we just had and kind of put them together. Okay, go ahead, Sina.
Okay, so this is 93. Stay beyond all thoughts in silent being awareness. Do you want me to read it one more time?
Sure.
Stay beyond all thoughts in silent being awareness.
Yeah. All right. And so here's the longer version of that where I was teaching that to myself. Thoughts interpret what is seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and felt, and therefore make a story about it. Stories are for characters. Specific characters may like or dislike based on interpretation, react one way or another based on interpretation. A character is a false self. Thoughts or interpretation is the character's script. All of this covers pure beingness, which is the true self. So see, if I'm acting out the anger, right? Acting it out, I am necessarily identified with the person. Do you see that? I'm believing the character script is mine. I'm believing the anger is mine. And believing the thoughts are mine. Therefore, I am necessarily identified as a person. where if I just go somewhere quiet and I stay in that beingness awareness that she read about, but let the anger live its life, you see, I'm not identified. It's the difference. I'll read that again and then continue. Thoughts interpret what is seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and felt, and therefore make a story about it. Stories are for characters. Specific characters may like or dislike based on interpretation, react one way or another based on interpretation. A character is a false self. Thoughts or interpretation is the character's script. All of this covers pure beingness, which is true self. Learn that all thoughts are meaningless because they are for the character, and the character isn't real. Disregard the thoughts, the character, interpretation. Experience seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling from pure being. Notice the same pureness in each experience, the same pureness as is in the beingness that I am. If interpretation appears, notice it from being. If interpretation is temporarily believed, notice believing from being. And that's all the time we have today. Sina, thank you very much for your help. Bye, everyone. Oh, wait, next week I won't be here because I'm in retreat. I should say that out loud. Yeah. I think the following week I will be here because it's still August. So I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Bye.